Welcome to the INSS podcast series. In this program, we are pleased to inaugurate our strategic partnership with the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. and the Emirates Policy Center in Abu Dhabi. In the spirit of the Abraham Accords, this trilateral strategic partnership will build on the momentum from the normalization process and serve as a hub for those in the global think tank community who seek to contribute to UAE-Israel relations. I am Dr. Yaron Schneider, and I will be joined by the Executive Director of the Institute for National Security Studies, retired Major General Amos Yadlin, and our guests from Washington, D.C. and Abu Dhabi, the President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, Mr. Fred Kempe, and the President of the Emirates Policy Center, Dr. Ebtesam al-Ketbi. Hello, marhaba, and shalom to all of you. So, first of all, I would like our guests, Ebtesam and Fred, to introduce themselves and their institutes. We'll start with you, Ebtesam.
Thank you. I am Ebtesam al-Ketbi, founder and president of Emirates Policy Center, which is an independent think tank based in Abu Dhabi, in UAE. I established EPC in September 2013 during the turmoil of Arab Spring to study the internal and external threats to nation state in the Arabian Gulf region and the border Arab world. EPC aims to determine and forecast the impact of geopolitical development and changes in the global balance of power on the UAE and the region.
Fred.
Hi, I'm Fred Kempe. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. And even though the Atlantic Council would suggest that we have a geographic remit that's transatlantic, we actually now have become a global council. Our mission is to shape the global future together with partners and allies. That's what we want to do in this relationship. We have a very strong operation looking at Middle Eastern issues, run by Will Wexler and Kirsten Fontaine-Rose, and we are about to enter our 60th year of existence.
So I would like to open our trilateral dialogue by asking each of you about the regional impact of the normalization. And maybe, first of all, we would like to discuss about the Gulf area. For that reason, I would like to ask you, Ebtesam, it appears that the leadership, the ministers, and many social activities in UAE expressed excitement about the Abraham Accords, and so were the reactions in Bahrain that followed this step. I would like to ask you first about the responses to the Abraham Accords among other Arab states in the Gulf region, such as Saudi Arabia and the neighbors.
Well, if we take first Saudi Arabia, it is evident that despite the particular situation of the kingdom and its spiritual status in the Muslim world, Riyadh has previously granted the approval for India Israeli flight to use its airspace, and also agreed recently to allow flights between Israel on one hand and UAE and Bahrain on the other to fly over also Saudi Arabia. So there is no doubt that Bahrain's decision to establish diplomatic ties with Israel is a sovereign one, but of course, however, this decision was coordinated between Bahraini and Riyadh due to the strong Saudi-Bahraini ties. Though Saudi social media, when you follow their comments on the new normalization deal between Sudan and Israel, we have noticed that Riyadh is trying to prepare its citizens to add an official feature to its tie with Israel. And the bottom line is that Saudi Arabia has not objected any step towards normalization of Arab-Israeli ties. The Friday sermon, after UAE UAE-Israel announcement of the deal, that sermon by Sheikh al-Sudais, Imam of Grand Mosque in Mecca, he talked positively about Jews. This is something not in the past, and that was a milestone that Saudi official religious institution support what the government fit to enhance its regional and international interest. Of course, we have to keep in mind that the widespread Saudi channel NBC has shown in last Ramadan this year a series that dealt with Saudi Jewish ties, and that series in a positive way, I would say, and that series has drawn a public debate which were considered as taboo in the kingdom. Also, several Saudi influencers, media figures have visited Israel last year. Also, prominent Saudi religious figures have taken a part in a live and public Israeli-American dialogue. Now, if we come to Kuwait, Kuwait has different situation. At the public level, Kuwait is still conservative and oppose normalization steps with Israel due to the big Palestinian community since the 50s and 40s, maybe also based in Kuwait, due also to a strong movement of Muslim Brotherhood called Islah in Kuwait, based also on nationalist movement has been since 50s because of its neighborhood with Iraq, Ba'athists and nationalists. So Kuwait will be the last Arab country to establish ties with Israel. There is a strong opposition by Kuwaiti elites and political circles for normalization steps. So, however, this is, or there is no criticism in Kuwaiti media outlet to Gulf and Arab states that have normalized with Israel. Now, if we move to Oman, of course, the clear, strong, early official Omani support for Abraham Accord shows Muscat might come after UAE and Bahrain for fully normalized relation with Israel. But in my view, that might be after, of course, the US election. Oman enjoys a strong and old covert and semi-official ties with Israel. There are no obstacle in front of converting them into full and comprehensive normalized ties. Oman received Netanyahu, and this was the first Arab country receiving, since the Ishaq Rabin to receive Israeli Prime Minister. Now, if you go to Qatar, this is a contradictory situation of Qatar. From one hand, they are the first Gulfists whom they went to have relation with Israel 1994, okay? And they opened the office for Israel there and keep that relation and keep funding Hamas for not attacking Israel. And this is the deal between the Qatari and Israel. Now, after the deal between UAE and Israel, Qatari media outlet, also with the Turkish outlet, keep attacking normalization agreement with Israel, because the other, they are Emirati and Bahraini, they are from the quartet, whom they blockade Qatari. And this is also competition for the role. So the outlet said that Doha is not in a hurry to get on board the train of normalization, and still in favor of two-state solution. Of course, there is also Khalid Mash'al is there, and some Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is hosting them there, and many of non-state actors in Doha. Now, some of reports, however, said that Qatar might normalize with Israel, and there is discussion about that. But the double standard of Qatar is, this is also an obstacle in front of it.
So let's go to the other side of the Gulf, and I'm speaking about Iran. What was the Iranian reaction? And do you think Iran is expected to do something in response?
Well, you know, Iran condemned, of course, on the first, because it considers itself, it's a loser, okay? It used to go, it went to the border of Syria, and from their perspective, this is to deter Israel. And now they found themselves that Israel on their offshore, okay? I think they lost their chances with the Gulfists because they were arrogant. They could have that peace treaty with the Gulfists, but they were arrogant and a treaty. So I think Iran is waiting for the outcome of US presidential election. It seems that avenging response by Tehran ruled that it's during this time, at least it will not do any kind of attack. It's waiting for the election. But now, if Oman choose full and official normalization with Israel, this is unlikely to contradict with Omani backdoor mediation channels between Tehran and Washington. This will be an important issue for Iran in the light of a new administration in Washington to show its willingness in the peace process. So this supports the scenario of no escalation by Tehran. But there is another analysis to point out that it's likely that Oman's support for UAE deal with Israel, that Muscat, there is a potential decision to sign such deal will come to serve regional stability in first place, and not for any bilateral support for ties with Israel. This is how that it will be shown for the Iranians. So this, however, does not mean that Iran direct escalation or through its proxies, it's impossible, okay, scenario. This picture mostly will be clearer in the next week after the US election, because we've been seeing the Iranian using Hezbollah, using Houthi attacking Saudi Arabia. Yesterday they sent that drones, and they tried. So Iran always in the region using its proxies. Now, the question about Iran remain related to the foreseen potential arms deals from China and Russia to Iran in light of accords with Israel, American arms deals to Gulf countries, and enhancing the qualitative edge from Israeli arms. This is might be make the equation same or balance, I would say. But I would also say that the Iranian, they are very clever, okay? And they will use now, just few days I got from Iranian ex-official, okay? He used to be in the government, and now he is an academician in Princeton, okay? And he sent an Iranian proposal for peace in the Gulf. So I read that what it means, let us make now peace initiative, including Iraq. He called it 6 and 2. The 2 is Iran and Iraq, and the 6, the GCC countries, offering, which is not far from what Rouhani offered in Hormuz initiative, the same, but you know, it's always in their initiative. And of course, he said nobody hegemon, nobody interfere, which is nobody's doing it from the GCC side. Always Iranian is doing it. Why bringing Iraq? Because Iranian always insist, because Iraq now, it's the backyard of the Iranian. So you have now 2 Iran plus 6, okay? So this is the trick, but they are feeling the heat. And that's why how I read that proposal from that guy, I think they used him to spread that proposal in his email to everybody he knows. So at the end, Iran is one from the loser of that, beside Turkey, from that peace agreement between the Arabs and Israel.
Okay, so Fred, the United States under the administration of Donald Trump is the one and only sponsor of these normalization agreements. I would like to ask you, how may this momentum of peacemaking affect US policy in the Middle East after the presidential elections that are coming very soon? Let's assume that Trump wins. Do you think he will be as adamant as now about moving the Israeli-Arab normalization process forward?
So first of all, it's important to note that of all the areas where Vice President Biden, the Democratic candidate, has criticized President Trump, he actually has spoken in favor of this agreement. And that's really important to note, because there aren't very many areas where they agree. And so he praised the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel for reaching this agreement, and Donald Trump. I think that in a second Trump administration, so we have the option of either Biden 1 or Trump 2. In a second Trump administration, I think you would see him wanting to build on this historic breakthrough. This probably is, most certainly is, his biggest foreign policy accomplishment of his first term. And so he would definitely want to build upon that. I think the best way to build upon it, and even, Jared Kushner and other people see this, is that Palestine and Palestinians would see the economic success, the real investment success, the economic success, the job creation success is probably more important than anything else that could come through this agreement. The head of foreign policy of the UAE, Dr. Anwar Gargash, spoke at the Atlantic Council and called it a warm peace. And this is possible because the UAE has not been at war with Israel. You have much more of a chance of exchange of tourism, exchange of investment in business, investment in each other's markets. This is the kind of thing that President Trump likes. He likes economic growth. He likes real deals. He likes transactions. And I think he'll just try to make more of it, try to bring in other countries, try to enlarge the circle, and ultimately put the Palestinians in a situation where their leadership is under pressure from the base to enter, hopefully over time, a two-state solution that would bring them into this as well.
And what would happen if Biden wins?
Very different attitudes toward the region, but I think the importance is that this agreement came before the election. And so in a way, he'll be coming into a fait accompli. This solves a problem for Vice President Biden because he's coming in a situation where Israel has already renounced annexation, which would have been a real point of tension between Israel. I don't think anyone should be surprised that the relationship between President Trump and Israel is probably closer than between Vice President Biden and Israel. On the other hand, he really wants to focus on other things in his presidency than the Middle East. And so I think he'll embrace this as something in the Middle East that is being generated by people from the Middle East themselves. This is the most positive part of this. This is Americans are really tired of military engagement in the Middle East. They are focused on the Indo-Pacific now as a place of security concern, and that is on the top of the list for Vice President Biden. So I think he will contribute to this as well. I think he'll try to build on it. He'll probably put much more emphasis on finding some solution for the Palestinians within this than the Trump administration would do. But he also will be delighted to move on to his priorities, which are in the Indo-Pacific, and not have to focus as much on this region. The real question is Iran. The Biden administration would like to return to the negotiation table with Iran. That's where he's been most critical in the Middle East of the Trump administration. And the question is whether Iran would bring itself back into compliance on nuclear issues, and whether Biden could make this move with Iran, which I think would be the most interesting change in a Biden administration.
Amos, what are the regional opportunities does these agreements create for Israel in view of the common interests or challenges of Israel and its neighbors?
I think the most important issue is the fact that after 25 years, a quarter of a century, we again speaking positively, and it's on the top of the agenda, a word we almost forget, which called peace. The fact that we are not only speaking about peace, but making peace is so important, so important. It's back into vocabulary of national objectives and what we're trying to achieve. I think, and Fred already referred to it, it will be a different kind of peace. Maybe the warmest peace ever between Israel and an Arab country. Because in this case, unlike Egypt and Jordan, we will have both the leadership and the people in the street supporting the peace. And this will enable us to do together a lot of cooperation, joint venture, trade, R&D together on every area, and then people going and see each other, get to know each other. Students exchange, tourism exchange. We have to get rid of Corona first, but the war and peace has two important parameters. First, it will show the other countries how much a real peace can bring real dividends. And second, that the other side is not as bad. The fact that for many, many years, the people in the Arab street and sometimes in the Israeli street were incited against each other will be going when they see that they are human beings. Who is unhappy in the Middle East from the Abraham Accord? Of course, the two threats that trying to have hegemony in the Middle East, Iran and Turkey. Iran is very aggressive vis-a-vis Israel, trying to develop nuclear weapons, trying to entrench in Syria with ballistic missiles. Turkey is less aggressive on military side, but still want to be, it is a threat. It is a threat mostly to the Arab world, less so to Israel. But what we are seeing now is an alliance against common enemies. And this is a change of atmosphere at least, and some reality on the ground in the Middle East.
So you were speaking about alliance. I would like to ask you, what are the advantages that Israel brings to this alliance? What are the advantages that Israel gains in dealing with regional challenges, and in what aspects may Israel assist its neighbors the most?
I think, first of all, alliance is always built on three pillars: interests, values, and trust. And we sharing interest already. I spoke about the interest of peace. Ebtesam spoke about the interest of stability, the interest to cope with the hegemons, the trying to take advantage of the fact that the US is disengaging from the Middle East. And this is, by the way, a bipartisan approach in America. Obama have started it, Trump continue it, and I think the Americans are tired, and justly so, from wars in the Middle East. Oil is not that important anymore. So the alliance is between small countries like Israel and UAE, like Israel and Egypt, which is not so small, vis-a-vis Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, all the radicals from all kinds. And besides this geostrategic interest, Israel can help the UAE on every aspect that Israel have developed in the last 70 years, starting from advanced agriculture, going to how to utilize the water in the desert, medicine, technology, high tech. And I think the UAE will enjoy cooperating with us. They have a lot what to bring from their own. It is a modern country. And the two of us together, I think, can show, and this is the most important, can show the Middle East that cooperation is much more beneficial than going to war.
Okay, so let's open the discussion about two major issues that you have already mentioned. The first is security threats, and the other is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So we'll start with security threats in the region. What do you think may be the contribution of the Abraham Accords to cooperation on common security concerns, especially Iran, its nuclear programs, and its regional outreach, and also terror groups that pose a threat to Israel, UAE, and the United States? And I suggest that we will go in the same order. Ebtesam, you'll be first, then Fred, and Amos will conclude. Ebtesam.
Okay. When trying to answer this question, we may think first of very optimistic scenario according to which Iran criticism of the UAE Israel peace accord is based on Tehran awareness that such a deal will enhance the axis of moderation and stability in the region and stand up to Iran's regional destabilizing policies that threaten Arab national states through supporting the militia group or even creating them like Hezbollah, like Hajj, and also non-state actors in countries like Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and other countries. So to be sure, the revolutionary Iran won't go ahead with its attempt to disturb regional peace and stability because it feels cautious as a result of the deal. Statements made by UAE officials stress that the peace agreement between UAE and Israel and not intended to send a hostile signal to Iran, but rather it is a way to enhance opportunities of stability, development, and of course, collective security in the region. Logic would point out that the peace deal can create new opportunities where UAE may act as a bridge to a dialogue and understanding to de-escalate tension between the Iranian and Israeli side. It's an opportunity if the Iranian wants to take it. So moreover, the emerging regional context as a result of the deal can create opportunities for Tehran in case it chooses to seize it, particularly with a potential new US president in the White House, and even with the Trump re-election. Trump already retreated that he can conclude a deal with the Iranian a month after he wins the election. Therefore, a new image in the Middle East may crystallize, which is very optimistic scenario. As for the second likely scenario, I believe Iran will see the peace accord as a challenge for its aggressive regional policies, and this may push Tehran to think of concluding a deal with the next US administration. So otherwise, Iran will be subject to more US pressure and sanction and will lose more. It is crucial for GCC countries and Israel to be present in any future US international negotiation with Iran, not like the previous deal, and avoid repeating the mistake with Obama administration made when it signed the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, and it was only US, Iran, and the others around them, whom also they suffered the outcome of that deal. They were not included.
Fred, please go ahead. About security threats.
So this could cut two ways regarding Iran. Over the short term, you could see Iran actually trying to heighten its activities to try to upset the security situation. And you could imagine that happening in Lebanon. You could imagine that happening in the territories. at the moment, you would think that they would rather try to upset the apple cart than not. On the other hand, however, if this is positive, I agree that it would put Iran very much on the defensive, and it may actually, particularly with the Biden administration, put us in a position where we can restart negotiations with Iran. The dream over time has got to be the kind of process that unfolded in Europe at the end of World War II, which was known as the Helsinki process, which brought together the Soviet Union, Western Europe, and the United States, talking about three baskets: human rights, economy, and security. We're a long way away from that with Iran. But should this become successful, that you actually create a modern, moderate coalition of countries, starting, of course, with the UAE, Israel, and Bahrain, but you already have Jordan and Egypt potentially being part of this modern, moderate coalition, and then adding to that potentially Oman, Morocco. We know that Sudan is now coming in. This very successful alliance of, I wouldn't call it a military alliance, but an economic alliance of countries. First of all, it could dramatically increase the Middle Eastern GDP. And as a message to the Iranian people, maybe it's better that one seek and sue for peace rather than continue to be at odds. So this this has the potential of setting off something that could change the region dramatically, but in the meantime, you may have some heightened threat of Iranian violence.
Amos.
Yeah, vis-a-vis Iran, we have to consider the JCPOA that Obama administration signed with Iran. We have to consider Trump leaving the JCPOA and exercising a maximum pressure strategy. And we have to consider the fact that coronavirus was another setback for Iran. So no doubt that Iran is now weaker than it used to be in 2018. Or let's say the maximum pressure created the pressure, created the leverage, but unfortunately haven't achieved its goal. On the contrary, Iran is now closer to the nuclear threshold than it used to be in 2018. And Iran is still trying to entrench in Syria and in Yemen, and has a lot of influence on Hezbollah, building its power. So whoever will be the next president in the White House will have to deal with Iran. My prediction is that negotiation first, whoever will be in the White House, because Trump is calling for negotiation. If you see his tweets in the last 2 years, he's calling all the time for negotiation. The Iranians didn't want to come, but now, if Trump re-elected, I don't think they can be under this pressure another 4 years. And they will try to come and negotiate. Biden, of course, will go back to negotiation and the Iranians will come happily. The question is, in what will be the opening position of Biden negotiators? Because I see two trends in the Democratic Party or the Democratic Foreign Affairs expert. Those who want to go back to 2016, even though we all understand that the assumption of the last agreement are very weak. And Iran was not moderated, Iran is still very negative, and the agreement gave them a lot of resources to their Millennium behavior. There is another group of Democrats who, how much they didn't like Trump policy, Trump created a leverage for them. Iran is weaker. You can have a better deal, JCPOA 2.0, with some corrections, some amendments to close the loopholes that the first JCPOA created. So this is, I think, will be the first year. And then depends on the results of the negotiation. US and Israel may face a real problem that after the negotiation was not successful, Iran is moving forward with the nuclear program. And then what is the policy? What Israel and America deciding to do when we all know that the objective, the ultimate objective, is that Iran will not have a nuclear bomb. But we'll have a couple of podcasts before we come to this junction.
For sure.
So another regional issue, which is actually, some might say, the core of the problems, the historical problems between Israel and its neighbor, is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which still seems to be intractable. Do you think the current normalization process may lead eventually to the return of Israel and the Palestinians to the negotiations table?
I think right now we have to watch for the dynamic between the Palestinian people and the Palestinian leadership. And if the Palestinian people see the results of this agreement, then you could see more pressure on the leadership to come back into negotiations. I think it will be harder under a Trump administration just because of the relationships and how it's unfolded and the Palestinian approach to this. My own view is, this is probably tough to say it this way, but over the years, from the Palestinian side, you very often see them miss the chance to seize opportunities they should seize. This is an opportunity they should seize. The question is, will the politics work in that direction? Here, I think the Atlantic Council would very much like to involve our European partners, because I think Europe initially underestimated the importance of the Abraham Accords. If we can get Europe on side with this, then I think Europe working together with the Palestinians, that you could work back into a situation of negotiation. I don't think it will be as easy to get the negotiations started in the Trump administration too, as it would be in a Biden administration. I think it would be easier to pick that up in the Biden administration. I think Europe is going to be key on this, partly because so much of the funding of the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian effort, has traditionally over time come through Europe. And I think Europe has to start asking itself, are they getting their money's worth out of this? And could not an agreement, this be the right time to move toward an agreement? It's going to be tough. I think the politics of it is really hard. But the reality is this would be in the interest of the Palestinian people to reach this. And I think you'll also see the Saudis. The Saudis have said they're willing to join this if we can reach a two-state solution or path to a two-state solution. So I'm hopelessly optimistic. And so I feel that what we've done is we've thrown a notion out the window that you could not have normalization and the improvement of Arab-Israeli relations without settling the Palestinian issue with Israel. Now that that's out the window, now that that is no longer considered a precondition, I think you actually are in a better situation for a Palestinian peace, because it's no longer as a blockade to something, it's instead an opportunity.
Amos.
I fully agree with Fred that we should look at it as an opportunity to the Palestinians and to the peace between Israel and Palestinians, and not as a threat that unfortunately many Palestinians see the Abraham Accord as a threat. First of all, they have to say thank you to the UAE for canceling the annexation. This was a move about to happen in 2020, and it was postponed, not in a month, not in a year. I think it was postponed for many, many years, if it's all. And the price for Israel to annex Palestinian territories is now higher. It used to be spoiling the relation with Egypt and Jordan. Now it's spoiling the relation with UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and hopefully some other countries in the future. I think it's a wake-up call for the Palestinians because they thought mistakenly that they have strong cards. First, the fact that the Arabs support them and gave them the veto on normalization with Israel. Second, that time is playing for them. Unfortunately, some people that negotiated between Israel and Palestine in 2014 convinced them that time is playing for them. And if Israel is not reached two-state solution according to the Palestinians' parameter, Israel is doomed. So wrong, Israel is not doomed. Time is playing for Israel and not for them. And third, of course, is always violence, but nobody in the West Bank want to go again to another intifada. And even in Gaza, the terrorists of Hamas are paying more attention to the economy of Gaza and to the condition of living of their own people. So the Palestinians have to understand that time is not playing for them. But who will play for them? The Arabs now. If the Arabs can come with them to negotiation, and as Fred said, the Europeans and the democratic administration in the US, the chances of them to reach an agreement is now an opportunity. And I hope instead of burning UAE flags, they will say thank you to the UAE and will create a framework and a mechanism to go back to negotiation again.
So the second question is about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Do you think the current normalization process may lead eventually to the return of Israel and the Palestinians to the negotiation table?
First, I would say I fully agreed with what Amos said. Palestinian has lost by themselves many opportunities, and we heard Prince Bandar in his interview with Al Arabiya channel how many opportunities and chances they by themselves deliberate they lost it. So I would say the first and immediate fruit of the Emirati-Israeli peace treaty was freezing a plan by Netanyahu to annex 1/3 of the land of the West Bank and Jordan Valley. So the treaty also represents a new leverage, though which the Palestinian issue was linked once again to the Arab-Israeli conflict, contrary to what some analysts suggest. So as we all know, many cards of the Palestinian issues were linked to the American-Israeli and American-Arab interaction in the region. So therefore, the new political weight, which is UAE has gained through this treaty, provides Abu Dhabi with more leverage in the Palestinian issue in a way that directly serves the Palestinian interests, which they lack, or what they have now, short sight. They cannot see what is the opportunities Abu Dhabi are bringing. So more importantly, the creation of an atmosphere of peace and cooperation in the Middle East and the promotion of moderation and stability in the regions, this is would help bring about shift in Israeli public opinion in terms of people in Israel may eventually realize that they win more when there is peace with Arab Palestinians, and can change the narrative, the hatred discourse between the two parties, between the Arabs and the Israeli. I would say it's in the best interests of the Palestinian to make more concessions with the Israeli. Now, what we heard, unfortunately, all this condemning, and I was laughing after the Sudan signed that treaty with Israel. So what is the queue of condemning? How many Arab countries now coming, and the Palestinian Authority standing condemning each peace treaty with Israel? UAE tried to think out of the box, thought that should be a breakthrough to bring a solution to turn this chaos in the Middle East to opportunities. And I think we all have seen that the Abrahamic Accord and what it's yield, and many opportunities. I'm saying the ball now in the ground of the Palestinian. They want to take it. They can take it. They can join the winners. Otherwise, they will be loser, because everybody, of course, if we are talking about a new Middle East, a new era, this is opportunities. If you will be stick on what you are since 70 years, you will not get anything. And we are just fed up of the same discourse we are hearing since 70 years, which did not bring any solution to any conflict in the region. This region full of crisis, full of blood, and people need to take a breath. And this new generation want another opportunities for their problem. Even the Palestinians, they are revisiting their ideas about, is it possible now to talk about the same issue we talked since 70 years, or we take what is offered on the table now and we join the others.
Finally, I would like to ask the three of you about the research partnership of INSS, the Atlantic Council, and the Emirates Policy Center, partnership in which fields of research. So you can simply raise whatever you like, and we'll try to have a conversation in this regard.
Of course, we have this partnership with Atlantic Council now since 2016, and we're happy. But this trilateral, it's very important with INSS, Atlantic Council, and EPC, which we are now planning to have this working group and different issues. From our side, we are looking to mapping the power in the region to know who's the real actors, who does what to whom and why, so we can from that plan our policies. We also, based on our expertise on Iran and Turkey, we want to work on this two states because of their disturbing role in the country. Other side, of course, we have joint, we are looking to have joint research in many issues based on our expertise in terms of geopolitics and risk analysis. We can offer that we are the window for the region, for the Gulf, and we can cooperate with the INSS and the Atlantic Council in this area.
Fred.
First of all, don't underestimate just the symbolic importance of this agreement among our three institutions. And I would hope we would be open to adding institutions from others who come into the normalization path. Second, I think there's a convening side to this, and there's a research side to this. We have seen the Emirates Policy Center as a master convener, brings together people in a very positive fashion in the UAE, and I could imagine doing something along those lines, and research is exciting as well. What truly excites me is the possibility of taking something that looks like a peace agreement, and actually, as Dr. Ebtesam said, pointing it strongly into the future. And for me, that is through unlocking the potential of the Middle East. We have a program in our Rafi Career Center for the Middle East called Empower ME, Empower the Middle East. And it focuses on unlocking the potential of youth, of women, and of entrepreneurs. The World Economic Forum did a report that was released last January. Some important members of the Atlantic Council were involved, that showed just through greater regional integration, deregulation, freer movement of people and products, you could double the GDP of the Middle East over the next decade. And that was before the Abraham Accord. That was before thinking of Israel being included. So I'm particularly interested in exploring the economic avenues and how we, from our perspective and our institutions, can promote the sort of relationship that has huge security implications but goes way beyond security.
So Amos, we will conclude with your remarks.
Okay, we all know why think tanks are existed. It's a power, a brain power that should help those who are in position of authority by the capability to research, to discover new knowledge, to come with new idea, with innovative approaches, and out-of-the-box kind of ideas to implement. All three institutes are respected in their countries, and the fact that we can do together research, an idea how to move forward is so important, because you cannot always get all the perspective if you only sit in Washington, DC, or in Abu Dhabi, or in Tel Aviv. And when you combine, there is a huge synergy here. So that's why we rush to make this agreement, to do the project. And especially, as my colleagues have said, we can contribute to the development, to the economy of the region. Double the GDP is a wonderful idea. We can contribute to have a more stability and peace in the region, and we can contribute to the security vis-a-vis the bad guys. So all these areas are open to cooperation, and I'm looking forward to start working together. And the good news is that next week, an INSS delegation will land for the first time in Abu Dhabi, and we move from Zoom meeting to a real meeting. So looking forward and hope to see you all on Zoom and again face-to-face.
Thank you very much. And I would also add to that soon there will be a conference of the three institutes. Details will be available soon. So before signing out, I would like to thank Ebtesam, Fred, and Amos for being with us. And thank you all for listening and watching this program. Goodbye. Ila liqa. Shalom.